Bespoken Spirits is a modern spirits company blending technology and tradition to take craft spirits to entirely new heights. Their unique craft maturation process unlocks amazing flavor combinations while reducing the environmental impact of each sip. The process is all natural and uses only the highest quality ingredients carefully sourced from the best mills, coopers, and distilleries. The result is an unparalleled flavor experience and something you can feel good about drinking. But don't take our word for it, try it yourself. Bespoken Spirits award-winning products can be purchased through retailers or online. Learn more at www.bespokenspirits.com. There's a new award-winning 4-grain straight bourbon whiskey that's been taking the market by storm, Penelope Bourbon. Penelope's balanced yet flavorful taste profile comes from a unique blend of 3 bourbon mash bills. Currently available in 3 expressions, 4-grain, barrel strength, and toasted, Penelope is remarkably smooth and flavorful. So whether you're sipping neat or using it in your favorite cocktail, Penelope is perfect for you. Penelope Bourbon is available throughout Kentucky, as well as select markets and online at penelopebourbon.com.
Proudly made in the USA and inspired by the American lifestyle, Country Smooth Bourbon was developed by the first female founder and CEO of an American bourbon whiskey company as a refined experience to be savored on its own or enjoyed in cocktails. We are dedicated to celebrating the spirit of America and the crafting of premium bourbon whiskey. To learn more, visit countrysmooth.com, where you can order online or find a retailer near you. Cheers. Country Smooth. Female founded, country grounded.
With Liquor Barn, you can shop your favorite bourbon, that perfect bottle of wine, or discover something new. To place an order for pickup or delivery, download the Liquor Barn app, visit liquorbarn.com, or call your nearest Liquor Barn location. Follow us on social media and subscribe to our email list for all the latest news on products, promotions, and events. Liquor Barn, where Kentuckians go to celebrate life. Cheers!
Welcome to the Bourbon Life Podcast, your source for all things bourbon. Join your hosts, Mark and Matt, as they drink and review bourbons, share news about upcoming events, interview the who's who in the bourbon world, and, most importantly, bring you along for the fun of living the bourbon life. Now, here's your hosts, Mark and Matt.
All right, everybody, welcome back for another episode of the Bourbon Life Podcast. I'm your host, Mark, and with me, as always, live in the Bourbon Life studios tonight is my good friend, my podcasting partner in crime, Matt. Matt, how you doing, man?
Good. I'm doing well. You had a whole weekend or a whole week off work, and that's all you can come up with is podcasting partner in crime there.
I wasn't sure what I was going to say, man. I know. Last week I was off almost every day. It was great. I took a almost entire week off for Thanksgiving, man. So
a whole week off, and that's all we get. All right.
I know. I'll work on it, man. We'll next week I'll jump back in and come up with something better than that. So, Matt, it's funny when I go back and listen to some of the old episodes, the things that we were doing. There was the Bourbon Life Bingo that we talked about all the time, which we don't do anymore. You not wearing pants because you like to wear shorts and stuff. So I don't know, crazy stuff, man, we used to talk about. So anyway, we are the Bourbon Life Podcast presented by Bespoken Spirits, and we do want to thank all of our sponsors. Matt, we don't have any Barrel Society birthdays this week. I just wanted to say that so people didn't think I forgot to mention our birthday people out there. So guys, next week, hopefully we'll get some birthdays up there. But with that said, Matt, you want to tell everybody who we have with us tonight?
Absolutely. And rest assured, my britches are securely fastened this evening. But we have joining with us on the podcast, the brand and sales manager from Starlight Distillery in Starlight, Indiana, James Wood. James, welcome to the Bourbon Life Podcast.
Thank you, guys. Much appreciated.
Yeah, man, we appreciate you being here with us. And we got some good things poured up here to drink tonight. So we're really looking forward to that. It's funny, James, I have not had any of your stuff, and but I'm on Instagram all the time with our Instagram account, and you guys are all over the place, man. So, how did that? That was going to be a question later down the road, but I want to just start it off with that question.
Should we start with what we're drinking?
All right, Matt. Let's do that real quick. Let's tell everybody what we're drinking.
Good call.
Yeah, good. See, Matt always reels me in, man. He keeps me on track there. So, Now this first round, we're poured up the old Rickhouse rye whiskey, and that's a 92 proofer. Says it's aged 4 years.
Mhm.
Other than that, I think your mash bill is 85 and then 15 barley. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay. But other than that, man, why don't you tell everybody else about what we got here?
Yeah. So you got the old Rickhouse rye, like you said, just kind of a homage to our Rickhouses, which are single story. We use metal ricks to hold our barrels. And we use those one story Rickhouses. We have 3 on site. Rickhouse number 3 houses our new make up to 3-year-old product. And then Rickhouse 2 actually houses our 3-year-old up to current aging, which is 7-8 years old. But the Rickhouse rye, it's a blend of, we actually have 2 rye mash bills that we make, 90% rye, 10% malted barley, and 80% rye, 20% malted barley. And so we just kind of average those out to the 85%, 15% on the label. And it's a blend of 4 to 6-year-old products. So there's more 4 than 5-year-old and more 5-year-old than 6-year-old. And that's kind of our standard right now with our ages, just because when we started distilling in 2013, it was very limited, I would say. And that only makes our oldest product 8 years old, or going on 8 years old. So that 4 to 6-year-old blend is just right for us right now until, of course, things do get older. And then we'll see about how we can change the age on that small batch blend.
Okay, well, great. Well, thanks for that explanation. We really appreciate that. Matt's a big fan of rye whiskey. Matt, what are you picking up on the nose on this one?
I'm really surprised by the nose on this. It's really sweet. That's the first thing I was noticing. I was expecting a little bit more grass, a little bit more grain, but it's really sweet. It's got a really nice sweet honey nose, and it's minty. I'm picking up like a lot of spearmint, a lot of peppermint on the nose, a little bit of the herbal herbaceous qualities of it, but just this really, really sweet, inviting nose. I really, really, really like it.
It almost reminds me, Matt, of like a sweet herbal tea. It's funny because with a little bit of honey in it, like you said, because there's that honey nose, but that mintiness coming through, maybe like a mint herbal tea. But yeah, so that's a really good note. And like you said, when you think 85% rye, you're thinking, wow, that's going to be spicy and kind of bowl you over. But it's actually kind of the complete opposite.
Yeah. I think that high barley content in there is going a little bit of ways to soften some of that out. I'm almost picking up like a little bit of grain or almost like a dark chocolate from the barley as well on it.
Yeah. James, did we get it right?
Yeah. I mean, you all are pretty much describing it how I describe it when I talk to folks about it, where I tell them it's kind of a honeyed sweetness with a bolder citrus nose, and then it's followed up by those earthy tones, if you will. And I think that falls more to our production method, where we distill on a 500-gallon Vendome copper pot still.
Oh, okay.
And we double pot distill everything as well. So, and it's a sweet mash fermentation process and distillation process as well. So I think all of those things combined is giving you what you are pulling off the nose.
Gotcha. Yeah, that makes sense. All right. So now we've introduced what we're drinking. Let's go back to my question that was going to be later in the episode, but it was just something, it just, because I'm on Instagram all the time with the Bourbon Life. We've got, 50,000 followers. And so, it's kind of a full-time job to keep up with all that. But I see so many people posting about you guys. And it's been over the last probably year and a half, 2 years that it's really seems like people have become more aware of who you are, and there's just more and more posts. So how have you managed to do that? I'm just curious. And I think our listeners would probably like to know that too.
Yeah. So it's honestly been kind of a wild journey. I started with Huber's and Huber Winery and Starlight Distillery in October of 2019. And in March of 2020, we all know what happened.
Right.
So I got hired on as the brand and sales manager. March 2020 happens, and I'm thinking to myself, what am I going to do for a job? I can't visit bars. I can't visit restaurants. I can't go to liquor stores. I can't work with my distribution partners. What can I bring to the table? So I requested to take over the Starlight Distillery Instagram account because we really wanted to focus on our spirits. And when I took over in May of 2020, the distillery Insta probably only had, I think it was just under 800 followers.
Yeah.
And then within the year, I got them up to over 5K.
Wow.
And we just crossed 6,000 yesterday or sometime over the weekend, maybe. And I think that's in part to the fan support that we have. Our I would say our ambassadors, really, but they really they're just fans of our product, and without them getting it to like some of the Instagram handles that you might recognize would be like Indiana Bourbon, Picks and Pours, Urban Bourbonist, Gotta Be Starlight, all these folks that just really got into us, I would say, in the middle of last year with some of our releases, that being like the honey barrel finish bourbon releases or the VDN releases or the bourbon charity releases that we did, are really what kind of elevated our Instagram account to where it was just, it blew up. I mean, every day as I'm still running the Instagram account, I'm getting like 5 tags a day, maybe multiple story tags, like, just all over the place.
Yeah, no, but that's great. And that's, obviously credit to you for putting in the work. Cause I know what that means to have to do that, and to grow an account like you have. It's great. Congratulations on that, but you've got a great product that, a lot of people really enjoy. So it's just been really cool to watch how that has grown. I've been on since 2018. So it's been really nice and really interesting to see how you guys have really just skyrocketed over the last year and a half or so. So that's really, really good job, man. So congratulations on that.
It's been a lot of fun. I didn't really expect much from it, but it's a lot of fun to do all of the interacting, answering messages, answering questions on comments, seeing what people post and how they enjoy Starlight versus, just not even versus, but just how everybody enjoys Starlight. It's a lot of fun to see.
Yeah. And then getting all the quote unquote influencers asking you for free stuff, right?
there is that. Yes. Which I review with ownership, and we go from there basically.
No, we recorded at a distillery over in Louisville a couple of months ago. And it was funny that, when we were off camera, the one thing the guy had said was, the one thing I appreciate about you guys is that you never message me and ask me to send you free stuff. So it's like, all right, well, that's cool. I appreciate that, man. That's pretty cool. So, all right. So let's get back and talk about you, James. We've never had the opportunity to meet before. I usually like to tell our listeners if I've had the chance to meet our guest, how and where we've met, but we've not had the opportunity to meet before. Hopefully we can correct that because you guys are not too far outside of Louisville, if I remember correctly.
Correct. Yeah.
And we're just over in Lexington, so it's not like it's that far away. So we definitely need to correct that. But just tell everybody, if you would, about yourself, where you came from, what your background is, and then how you got into the wonderful world of whiskey and how you ended up there at Starlight.
Yeah. So I am a Louisville guy. I still live in Louisville, born and raised. And I.
Sorry about that game this weekend, by the way.
God, I do not want to talk about it at all. It was disgusting.
Sorry.
No, it's fine. Completely understandable. I didn't even watch it. Like through the first quarter, I was just kind of like, this is over. I'm going to turn the game off. I'm a UK grad like 3 times over, so I bleed blue, and I was really worried going into that game, especially since Louisville was a 3-point favorite. Yeah,
and it was at home. You just never know what's going to happen.
Yep.
But after that first quarter, I was like, okay, I think we might be able to do this.
Yeah. So I think one of the headlines I saw was like Las Vegas completely whiffed So, and I don't bet, but I read all the headlines, of course.
Yeah.
But yeah, so Louisville born and raised. I did graduate U of L. And honestly, like the way I got into the industry was just, I started out bartending when I was 21. And I didn't even drink whiskey when I was 21. And the reason for that is I blacked out on Jim Beam White Label when I was 18. So yeah, like, so I didn't start really getting into whiskey again until I was 23. And that was because I was in a craft cocktail kind of bar setting. And being in Kentucky, you can't be a bartender and not know bourbon.
Right.
Whether it be cocktails, flavor profiles, anything like that. So I went to Woodford Reserve when I was 23. I'm currently 32, by the way. And I just fell in love with what Woodford had to offer. You know, you go there, it's a beautiful distillery, historical, great product, of course. And that just kind of set me on my bourbon journey. I stopped.
So that was a visit. You just went to visit the distillery.
Yeah.
Okay, I got you.
Yeah, I did the tour, did the tasting, just visited, and subsequently visited other distilleries as well after that. The next step in my life was working for Total Wine in Louisville. I helped open the first Total Wine in Kentucky. Came on as kind of their main spirit sales associate for that store. And this was after I left bartending and the cocktail culture. And so I was brought on because of my knowledge of spirits, my knowledge of cocktails. They wanted me to work those aisles and help, to put it frankly, help fill carts. You know, when people are asking about spirits, it's usually not just about a spirit. They want to make cocktails. They're hosting a party. So, not only are you going to buy this gin, but we're going to get you to buy some lemon juice. We're going to get you maybe buy some elderflower liqueur. It's all about the sales approach, right?
Right.
So I did that for a few years. Started as a sales associate. I worked in receiving, with POs and invoicing, and unloading and loading product. And then I left Total Wine as the wine supervisor, in charge of kind of our wine sales team and things like that, to go work for the Hubers. They created the position in 2019, and I applied. Large field of candidates, and luckily I was the one that got it. So wow. That's how I ended up at Hubers. But it's really fun it's kind of shocking, but also fun to tell people that I've been in the liquor industry, if you will, for a decade now. Yeah. It's just a weird thing to say, but it's been a really fun journey, and it's just a lot of fun to be in the industry.
So years ago, back when you were 21 years old as a bartender, did you ever in your mind think or say or wish, man, one day I would absolutely love to work for a distillery or work in the whiskey bourbon industry?
I mean, it was a far-fetched dream. Like, it's because, there are those people that want to be in the cocktail industry and the bartending industry for their entire life and things like that. But I just didn't really see that for myself. Right. I wanted to keep learning, keep growing, keep doing new things, if you will. And it was just pure happenstance that, I'm scrolling through, whatever kind of resume site, job site. There it is, Huber's brand and sales manager. I was like, I think I can get out of Total and do this. Yeah. And yeah, it's a wild ride because, I didn't go to school for any business or marketing or social media. It's purely experience that I was able to get the job.
Yeah, but that's awesome, man. It speaks volumes about what they thought about you, obviously, because, you've been a bartender, you worked in the industry, you're familiar with that aspect of it. You worked at Total Wine, you worked in the spirits, and then you were, the wine manager. So you're a wine guy too, is that right? I'm assuming.
Yeah. Big wine guy.
Okay. Yeah. So that obviously had a lot of appeal to them because you had the wine experience, I think, and the spirits experience too, right?
Yes. Yeah. Being able to talk about both wine and spirits, coming from a sales perspective as well, from working at Total, that as whether you love them or hate them, Total Wine, as an employee, you get a lot of great experience and knowledge.
Yeah.
And I was able to utilize that. And I still do utilize that when I'm visiting accounts currently for Huber's specifically.
Yeah, man. I mean, I'm about 2 minutes from their store here in Hamburg, so I'm a big fan because I can just jump over and find what I need. But we appreciate them. I always appreciate those guys, and they always take care of us over there too. So Matt, let's jump in and talk about the rye though. Let's talk about what we're picking up in terms of the palate and the finish on this one. So what do you get on it?
It's got a really nice palate as well. I think a lot of what I'm smelling on the nose and some of the aromas that are coming through on the nose come through on the palate. It's got a nice honey sweetness, a little bit of a toasty honey, almost like a bruleed sugar sweetness up at the front. And I think it lends to something a little darker, almost like molasses or some other, like a dark brown sugar or some other sweetness. Then it's got the nice rye pepperiness coming through mid palate, and it brings through with the earthy herbal tones as well. I get some mint on it, a nice pepper finish as well. It's not overly hot. That's not certainly not a 95.5. I really like it. I think it's really well balanced, and I think it's got a really really unique taste on it. I enjoy this.
Yeah, I'd like, I was really surprised by the sweetness, but I guess, that carries over. We talked about it on the nose. When you take that initial taste, you get a lot of that sweetness. But then, mid palate, it switches over. The sweetness lingers a little bit, but that pepperiness, that spiciness really starts popping through, and you can feel it on your tongue. And it's a pretty neat combination of sweet and that spiciness. So yeah, I really like that. James, did we do okay on that one?
Yeah, definitely. You talk about that bruleed sugar, that sweetness pairing with savoriness. And I feel like to maybe put it into maybe more understandable terms, like think of a Hawaiian pizza where you have that sweetness. And obviously these are completely different flavor profiles as well, but just an image, if you will, of you have the sweetness from the pineapple with the savoriness of kind of those other flavors on a Hawaiian pizza, just pairing beautifully. I think that's what our rye whiskey does. It takes that honey, it takes that sweetness, you pair it with some of that pepperiness, some of those tea tones, and it just goes so well together that a lot of people, when they drink rye whiskey, they are expecting big mint bombs or big like star anise licorice bombs, and that just isn't us. Like those flavors, I would say, are complementary of the other flavors that you're experiencing in this blend.
Yeah, this one to me could be pretty dangerous, I think, just because it's so sweet on the palate initially, and that spiciness just kicks in. Man, I just absolutely love the way it finishes, and it lingers for so long too.
Yeah, it reminds me a lot of some of the pinhook ryes that we've had, where they have a lot of character, a lot of flavor. I really, really enjoy this, and quite frankly, the thought of tasting a rye that tastes like a ham and pineapple pizza is pretty inviting as well. So I appreciate that analogy. But this is really good. Having never had this before, James, I'm really impressed.
Thank you. Yeah. The Hubers, so Ted, our current owner and president, and master distiller, head winemaker, oversees all operations. His two sons, Christian and Blake, both in their mid-20s. And then our other kind of main distiller, Jesse Williams. They are doing all of the distilling hands-on, if you will. We don't have any kind of computer software or automated distilling process, if you will. So they're essentially checking their watches, nosing, using their senses to see, when are we cutting from heads to hearts and hearts to tails. and using just a proofing thermometer as well, to see like where we are as far as where everything is sitting. And I think it's a testament to what they're able to do with their knowledge and their skill, and making just a quality handcrafted rye whiskey. Because I think the rye speaks for itself, that whether you're an experienced rye drinker or a new rye drinker, this will do well on all palates.
Yep, I agree with that. And Matt's an experienced rye drinker. It's his favorite. Well, you are, man. I mean, I would consider you an experienced rye drinker. It's your favorite, and you obviously enjoy it. I'm not quite as big a rye drinker as Matt is. I'm getting to that point slowly but surely. But yeah, this one just hits the right notes. That combination of flavors, it like I said, it's something I could easily sip on and probably end up sipping too much.
Yeah, and I think the other good thing about it is that it's a quality rye, 4 to 6 years old, and again, I think we can all agree that rye whiskey comes to age a lot sooner than bourbon whiskey does. Right. Mm-hmm. But it is still only a $35 MSRP, and you know, incredible. So I think with the price point, with the quality of the whiskey, like it just kind of it should be on everybody's list.
Yeah, and especially, I mean, at that price, that's a price for $750.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Wow. That's pretty impressive. That's really impressive.
I think I just found my stocking stuffers for the Christmas season here.
There you go.
Well, yeah. God, I tell you what, let's final thoughts. So on this rye, we'll take a quick break here in a minute. But let's get to final thoughts, Matt, on the old Rickhouse rye. What do you think?
I'm blown away. I was not expecting to get this much flavor and this much of a profile from it coming into this. I'd like to think I didn't have any expectations, but I am really, really pleased. This is great. I will definitely be recommending this.
I completely agree with that, Matt. Yeah, definitely. Well said. And definitely concur. I'm happy that I waited to open these bottles until today. Because it's like, wow, this is, I love it when I'm really surprised. So this is great. Well, I'll tell you what, let's take a break real quick and get a word from our sponsors. And we'll be back with more with James Wood, the brand and sales manager for Starlight Distillery, in just a minute.
The Stave Restaurant is a bourbon lover's paradise right here in the heart of bourbon country. Located at 5711 McCracken Pike in Millville, Kentucky, between Castle and Key and Woodford Reserve, Chef Kyle Klatka prepares amazing food each day that features an elevated Kentucky-inspired cuisine. With a full-service bar, great bourbon flights, and signature cocktails, the Stave is the perfect place to catch up with friends after a fun-filled day of touring the local distilleries. Be sure to check them out online at thestavekentucky.com or at Instagram and Facebook at The Stave Kentucky.
Spirits of French Lick crafts their spirits using only the finest agricultural product that has defined character, following their motto, respect the grain. They lead the way in representing the quality of the Hoosier artisan distilling process while paying tribute to its inseparable past. By implementing best practices from those early times, combined with modern touches, Spirits of French Lick has created a truly unique place in the industry. Spirits of French Lick products are distributed throughout Indiana, Kentucky, and Missouri, and can also be purchased online through Sealbox at sealbox.com. Visit spiritsofFrenchlick.com to learn more information and make sure to follow them on Facebook and Instagram.
All right, everybody, welcome back for round session period, whatever you want to call it, number 2 of the Bourbon Life Podcast. I'm your host, Mark, and with me, as always, Matt. I didn't even in the break come up with some creative thing to say, but I'm just going to say with me, as always, is my good friend and co-host, Matt. How you doing out there, Matt?
Hey, Mark, I'm doing great, man. As always, doing really well. Glad to be back. Just had us a nice American Thanksgiving over here.
Yes, sir.
That was always fun, but ready to kick it off the holiday season. But also excited to be back with James Wood, the brand and sales manager from Starlight Distillery. James, welcome back for the second round session period, whatever you want to call it, of the Bourbon Life Podcast.
Sounds good. No, again, much appreciated. I was honestly grabbing a quick snap so I can show my friends what I'm doing while you were doing the introduction.
Oh, cool. Yeah. No, that's great, man. We're happy to have you on the show, definitely, man. And finally happy to get to sit down with you. We'll have to come over to the distillery at some point though, and do another one of these or something and check
Yeah.
everything out. So that'd be a lot of fun. Now that hopefully, fingers crossed, just when you think you're getting out of the whole COVID thing, they come up with a new variant or something. It's like, no, it's like, come on, man.
Yeah.
Stop.
Can we please just stop it?
Yeah.
I'm right there with you guys.
All right. So this round, we got something different poured up. This is the Carl T bourbon, I believe. So is that correct? Is that the correct terminology for it? Or is that what you guys refer to it? Okay.
Yeah. Just good old Carl T.
Good old Carl T. So if you want to, James, I'll just let you kind of tell everybody a little bit about the bourbon itself.
Yeah. So Carl T is, again, we really enjoy at Starlight Distillery, Huber Winery, to pay homage to family members, history, the terroir of the farm. And so Carl T is actually our current ownership's grandpa. So we are currently owned and operated by sixth generation Hubers, Ted Huber and his first cousin, Greg Huber. Ted is our president and Greg is our CEO. And then their wives are involved in the structure as well. But yeah, so their grandpa essentially is who we named our bourbon after, fourth generation Huber, Carl Theodore Huber. And then coincidentally, well, not coincidentally, but a decision was made. Our number one selling wine, which is a sweet red wine made from Concord grapes called Sweet Marcella, is named after Carl T's wife, Marcella Huber. So you have Carl T and you have Sweet Marcella, and as our kind of top tier products, if you will. So
nice.
As an homage, yeah.
Very nice. And this one is also 92 proof, just like the rye. So is that just a standard? Was that decision because you proof it down and magically that's where the rye and the bourbon both just hit their sweet spot, or was that just something intentional to get to 92? Or
no, I think it was just when we were working on coming up with our mash bills and our proofing and where do we want to bottle at, especially for a small batch blend. And keep in mind, the blend originally started as a 2-year-old blend, then it was a 2 to 3-year-old blend, and it's worked its way up to a 4 to 6-year-old blend, where just like the rye whiskey, there's more 4-year-old than 5-year-old and more 5-year-old than 6-year-old. But again, that hands-on process of figuring out what we want to do started with, our distillers and the Hubers nosing and tasting things at, let's say, 98 proof, 96 proof, 94 proof, and all the way down to 80 proof. And what they realized is that at 92 proof, it just expressed what the Hubers wanted Carl T to be. And that's what it stayed at since it was created, essentially. So
gotcha.
It was just, I don't want to necessarily say trial and error, but it was a range of proofs that were then decided on after going through everything.
Okay. And the bottle says this one's aged 4 years, but like you just said, I guess it's a blend between 4 and 6-year-olds. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah. So we just have that minimum age statement on there. And that's something that the Hubers are really proud of, I would say, with that age statement, since we are distilling everything and everything is coming from our facilities, that, when we are ready to up the age on our label from, say, 4 to 5, 5 to 6, and, subsequent aging ups, if you will, the age statement will be staying on there per discussions with Ted that I've had. So they're very proud of that age statement.
Yeah, that's really impressive that you guys do that, because once you hit that magic 4-year number, a lot of people just say, "Oh, we don't have to disclose how old we are."
Yep. Yeah. Exactly.
So it's gone, but you guys keep it on there, so that's great. Now, is this one also? I know it's a blend, but you said the rye was a blend of 2 different mash bills. Is this bourbon a blend of different mash bills, or is it one consistent mash bill?
No, just like the rye, it is multiple mash bills as well.
Okay.
So we have our 4-grain bourbon mash bill, which is 51% corn, 20% rye, 20% malted barley, and 9% wheat. And then you have a 3-grain mash bill that takes out the wheat, ups the corn to 60% corn, 20% rye, 20% malted barley. And so it's a blend of those two mash bills as well.
Okay, great. Well, Matt, so what do you pick up in terms of the nose on this one, man?
So there's a lot going on here. Not just with the nose, but also the mash bill itself, to be mixing all the different kinds and getting 4 to 5, 5 to 6, and the 2 different mash bills. So, wow, I didn't realize that. There's quite a bit going here.
Well, if I can cut you off real quick.
Yeah, please do. Just cut him off. Stop.
Yeah, for real. Thank you. Our fans have been saying that for years now.
I just want to add another level of complexity to both the rye whiskey and the bourbon. So we actually work with 6 different cooperages that provide 3 to 4 different barrel types to age our whiskeys in. Technically, we work with 7 cooperages, but one of those cooperages really only provides finishing barrels for us.
Okay.
So things that we export in, say like Sauternes barrels, sherry barrels, things like that. But the other 6 distilleries or cooperages, sorry, like I said, we get their barrel types, 3 to 4 different barrels of level, various char levels, toastings, toasted head, charred head, things like that. And so you add on that level of complexity to the 2 mash bills. And I think it makes that experience of what you're sampling and enjoying even more uplifting, if you will.
Yeah.
There you go, Matt. Do all the permutations on that and how many different combinations that you can have, man.
Yeah, no doubt. I've got my work cut out for me here to try to let you know what we're tasting on. But the nose is really inviting. It's got sweetness right off the start. And I feel like on the first whiff, I almost picked up some dark stone fruit, like a little bit of plum, maybe like some currant. But what I'm really getting on the nose of this, especially as it has sat in the glass a little bit longer, is like a combination of honey, sugar, and like almond meal or almond extract, which some people would commonly say is actually marzipan, because that's what marzipan is just sugar, honey.
Wait a second. That's meal. The first time I think I've heard Matt use the marzipan as a descriptor.
Well, yeah.
In 95 episodes, man. So
I know it's faux pas to say, but
no, it's delicious. But you're right. I mean, I get it. I
pick up. Good.
Yeah, I love it. I've cooked with it, baked with it. A couple different jobs in the past, but I really like it. It's got a nice almond nose to it, the sweetness of the honey, and then it's almost like lending way to a little bit of a brittle, kind of like that darker sugar and a little bit of peanut or a little nutty flavor on it as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
well, I can't top that. Caramel and vanilla. How's that? No, I'm just kidding. James, how do you do, man?
No, I think between the two of you, you're both on the spot. The way I describe Carl T is it gives you all those bourbon flavors that you want. You're looking at that fruitiness. You're looking at those dessert flavors like vanilla and caramel, and you're looking at some of those oak spices, and it's some of those dessert spices as well. But the great thing is that it has none of that initial burn. Even I would even say on the first sip, like it's not there. You get all that flavor right on the front palate. It coats the sides of the mouth really well. And then it gets into your chest and it just kind of sits there for a solid 15 to 30 seconds. Like it's not too long, but it's not too short. And so I think it's just, again, a great quality whiskey, with all the flavors that you want, with none of the negatives that are typically associated with bourbon, if you will.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's you think 4 years old, you think, oh, that's young, but this is a blend of 4, 5, and 6. So you're starting to get into, at least from Kentucky bourbon aspect, you think 6, 7, and 8. Those are kind of the sweet spot years. But yeah, this is a great blend. I mean, on the nose, it's great. We'll come back to the palate here in a few minutes. But so, James, let's talk a little bit or a lot of bit about the distillery itself. Can you kind of talk about, because we say Starlight Distillery, but you've mentioned the Hubers and the Huber Winery. So just so our listeners understand how all those players come together and what all that interaction means, can you kind of explain that for everybody, please?
Yeah, of course. So we are a large farm property, first and foremost. Our farm currently sits between like 650 and 700 acres of land, where we grow various grains, fruits, vegetables, gourds, Christmas trees. And our fruit acreage makes us Indiana's largest fruit farm. And our vineyard acreage makes us Indiana's largest estate-grown winery. And so that's kind of the first thing to know. And that farm has grown, like I said, up to roughly 650 to 700 acres from an original 80 acres that our first generation Huber, Simon Huber, plotted back in the mid 1800s, 1843. So one of the things that I like to point out, just to kind of connect some dots here, is, Simon actually tried to found and settle some land in Kentucky, in Louisville, when he immigrated from Germany with his family. But he just couldn't find any suitable land, to be honest. So he went just a little bit north. We are just roughly 30 minutes north of Louisville. You can either get to us from I-65 or I-64. We're kind of like smack dab in the middle of the hills of Indiana from the two expressways. And he just found this great plot of land, started growing fruits essentially. And while he was doing that, he was doing some distilling and some winemaking as well. And I bring this up because I tell people all the time, historically, if we had settled in Louisville, and we are doing what we were doing, are doing nowadays just in Louisville, I firmly believe that Ted Huber, our again, current president, owner, head winemaker, head distiller, would be one of those good old boys like Harlan Wheatley, Jim Rutledge, Chris Morris, the Russells, all those guys. It's just that because he's 30 minutes north into Indiana, he's not. So that's kind of where we started. Simon with those 80 acres growing into what we are nowadays. And, growing into what we are nowadays consists of having a farm market where we sell our produce that we grow, as well as other things, candies, fudges, breads, all sorts of different things in our farm market. We have non-alcoholic apple cider that we make from our apple trees. But that also includes our winery. And the winery actually opened in the late 70s, in the late 1970s.
Oh, okay.
And, we started out, our first commercially sold wine was our strawberry wine, which we still make to this day. And we didn't really get into the traditional styles of wine, I would say, until the mid 90s. We hired on a winemaker. His name's Jason. He still works with us today. And him and Ted actually grew our dry wine business, if you will, bringing in things like Cabernet Sauvignon, Malbec, Cabernet Franc. We make Pinot Gris. We actually just had our very first harvest of Chardonnay with a Petit Chablis clone. So what started out as a sweet wine production has grown into dry reds, dry whites, dessert wines, sparkling wines, sweet wines, of course, fruit wines. And then in the early 2000s, 2001 to be exact, we opened Starlight Distillery. The challenge to opening Starlight Distillery and starting production, though, was with Indiana state law. Essentially, you could not make craft spirits in Indiana before 2001.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh.
It was, everybody thinks of MGP. How are they able to produce spirits and, things like that? Well, they were grandfathered in, of course, because of
Gotcha.
prohibition, doctor
Right.
contracts, government, all these different things. Right. So Ted, along with other craft distillers in the state, or people who were interested in distilling in the state, as well as some lobbying agencies, lobbied the Indiana state government. And in 2000, a craft distillers or an artisan distiller's permit was passed and created. So we were able to get that. And with that, our DSP is DSP Indiana 31.
Okay.
And we started distilling spirits in 2001. Now, what that means, though, is we were only able to distill fruit-based spirits. The distiller's permit did not allow us to distill grain-based spirits.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm assuming that you all are probably going to ask me, like, why don't we have 20-year-old whiskey? And that's the reason why.
Why don't you have 20-year-old bourbon? Where is it?
Yeah.
It's in the Rickhouse.
Yeah. It's not for sale. So, but yeah, so that artisan distiller's permit only allowed craft distillers to do fruit-based spirits at the time, which honestly that's fine with us. We have apples at the time. We have pears. We have peaches. We could do liqueurs like blueberry liqueur. We can do fortified fruit wines, if you will. Our fortified fruit wines are called infusions. So like we have a strawberry infusion, peach infusion, raspberry infusion, and they're very similar to ports. It's just they're not made with grapes.
Okay.
So, we're doing our thing. Which, by the way, we do have 20-year-old brandies. I'm just saying we do have those.
Well, it's funny because a lot of people don't know, I guess, that Southern Indiana at one point was like the biggest, largest producer of apple brandy in the country or in the world. I mean, it was huge, wasn't it?
Well, and not only apple brandies, but wine.
Oh, okay.
Back in, I want to say the late 1800s, Indiana was the largest state producing wine. Unfortunately, the state got hit with phylloxera, the wine killer, if you will, grape killer. And that's when a lot of wine production moved to Missouri. And then phylloxera hit again. And that's when a lot of wine moved out to California.
Oh, okay.
So
I didn't realize that.
Yeah. And that's why California is, what it is today. One of the reasons.
Sure.
But yeah, so, I mean, just like with, say, Pennsylvania and, the Northeast with apple brandy, Indiana and the Midwest was just as large. And so, getting back to the distillers in Indiana currently, they're all distilling fruit-based spirits. And, they wanted to do more. They wanted to be able to produce grain-based spirits. And so those same distillers with those lobbying partners, again, lobbied the Indiana state legislature to get that law changed. And in 2013, artisan distiller permit holders could start distilling grain-based spirits with that law change, with that successful law change. So for us, that's why our oldest whiskey, whether it be rye, malt, bourbon, is only 8 years old, because we're not bringing in any older products to just bottle. Mm-hmm. We're doing our own thing, and I think one of the things that we're fortunate for is that the winery was able to help fund the distillery to where we could just sit on product, as opposed to like we need to make money. Right. So we had a very unique situation, being Huber's Farm, Huber's Winery, and now Huber's. Technically, it is Huber's Starlight Distillery, but it's making those connections for folks. The name to the distillery.
Yeah, that's a great explanation. I really appreciate you laying that out and letting everybody know. Plus, the history is obviously very interesting to be able to say you can trace it back. I mean, you're talking about 1843. You're talking almost 180 years the family history there. That's super impressive because, you talk about Kentucky distilleries and they talk about, we can trace it back 200 and whatever years. And, there's some gaps in those stories and there's some things here and there you just don't know. But to be able to say that, you can trace it back to this one guy that owned this 80 acres and he's in our family, it's really cool that you can trace that back to that history. Very cool.
Well, and just to kind of go off of that, we are still privately and family owned,
Okay.
There's no outside business kind of guiding the family on business decisions or, there's no investors trying to tell us what to do. We are fully owned and operated by, like I said earlier, Ted and his first cousin, Greg. With, again, they're the sixth generation. When they're ready to retire, which I'm assuming for both will be never, because you got to remember, they're farmers. Like farmers just kind of don't stop working. But eventually the seventh generation. So for Ted and his wife, Dana, their two sons, Christian and Blake, will eventually take over operations for the winery, the distillery. And then Greg and his wife, Jan, and their three kids are actually in their 30s. So those three are older than Christian and Blake.
Okay.
But they will be looking after like our kind of our finances and the farm. And we have an event space that one of them is the head of, if you will. So they're all primed and ready to be able to take over, I'd say, in like the next probably 15 to 20 years.
Okay. Well, that's good to know. So let's jump back and talk, because we're at the end of round 2 here. Let's talk about the bourbon, Matt. What do you get in terms of the palate and finish on this one?
Let's talk about Carl T. It's got
Carl Theodore.
That's right.
There you go.
It's got a nice honey sweetness right up front that I pick up. And then I'm also picking up like honey roast peanuts right at the start of the palate as well. Then some of that wheat comes through, and a lot of the barrel char, a lot of the oak is coming through as well. The wheat is coming in the middle of the palate. I get a nice sweetness, thinking like warm wheat bread. And then I get some dark fruit, get some plums, some fig kind of mid palate before it kind of dissipates out with some nice oak again on the finish, and a little bit more of the sweetness and a little nuttiness. And I think some of that rye is coming through as well. There's like something a little bit herbal on the finish, but it's not like super peppery. It's more of like an earthy herbal type finish with it as well. It's good. It's excellent. Just like the rye. I'm very impressed.
I think the one thing that surprises me is how sweet it is on the palate, because it's, would you say 51% and a 60%?
Yes. Yeah.
Mash bill. So it's not, going to be like a Kentucky bourbon where you're talking 77% or something like that. So the corn percentages aren't super high, but it's just so sweet. I mean, it's just so sugary sweet to me. When I taste it again, this could be one that would be dangerous to me, because it'd be super easy to sip on and enjoyable. Matt, I agree. You get a little bit of that oakiness, but it's not tannic. It's not drying. That's something that I have a hard time with bourbons, when they have that tannic finish and you feel like you have to take a drink of water afterwards, just to, get some moisture back in your mouth from it. I don't get that at all on this. I do get that a little bit of spiciness on this, Matt. You were talking about the mintiness, or the herbalness, but for me, it's coming across spicy again on my tongue. And I don't know if that's from the rye or from the barrel, but it's a great combination of flavors. I really enjoy it, James.
Yeah. And again, I think you all are hitting all the right notes on it. I think that Matt, with those fruit flavors, I think Christian and Blake would be really happy to hear you say that. They're huge proponents, I would say, of like trying to express those fruit flavors in whiskeys, specifically bourbon. Because, when we think of bourbon, we hear so much about vanilla, caramel, spice. You don't really hear a lot about those like fruit esters when we talk about bourbon specifically. So I think that they would be really happy to hear that you're pulling that off the nose and the palate. because they're huge into those types of flavors. And I think one of the things to keep in mind, just to share with you also, technically, like, our batches are kind of different from batch to batch because they are, when we say a small batch blend, like, it's literally a 12 to 15 barrel blend.
Okay.
There is no technical designation for a small batch, right?
Right.
A small batch for us is obviously different than a small batch from, let's say, Heaven Hill,
which is like 500 barrel small batch.
Exactly. And so the thing to remember about, Old Rickhouse and Carl T is that, they're bringing a winemaker's blending knowledge into this. And so Carl T and Old Rickhouse are kind of like these imaginary flavor profiles that they have in their heads. And when they go through a lot of whiskey, which for us, a lot of whiskey is like 60 barrels. So they'll pull out a lot and they will literally sample all 60 barrels. And then they'll go through and say, we think these 12 to 15 barrels will make the Carl T or Old Rickhouse flavor profile that we're looking for.
Gotcha.
So keeping that in mind, whatever batch of Carl T and Old Rickhouse you have right now, it'll say on the label, you go and look for another batch. Potentially you could tell that, your palates are obviously trained enough. You could pick up those minute differences from batch to batch, while also recognizing kind of the overall general flavor profile that the Hubers are trying to achieve with those small batch whiskeys. So it's kind of a fun taste experiment, if you will, to be able to say, oh, here's batch number this and here's batch number this. It's almost like a vertical wine flight, if you will, like being able to try and figure out, like, the 16, 17, and 18, what's the difference in this and these vintage cabs, so it's, here's this batch number, this batch number, this batch number for Carl T. Let's see if we can pick out like the minute differences on these batches, because we're trying to express the grains grown on a certain day that were distilled a certain, and all that sort of jazz. So if you really want to get into it, that's kind of the fun of it, if you will.
Sure. No, that sounds great. Well, I'll tell you what, we're at the end of round 3, and we'll come back and finish this conversation in round 3. We're at the end of round 2. Sorry. We'll finish this conversation in round 3. That's what I was trying to say. So final thoughts though, Matt, on the bourbon. What do you think on the Carl T?
Again, I'm really impressed.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah,
I
agree.
Thank you.
I concur with that. So, all right, let's take a quick break, get a word from our sponsors, and we'll be back with more with James Wood, the brand and sales manager with Starlight Distillery, in just a minute.
Three Chord's line of whiskeys embody the spirit of creativity. The whiskey is a true collaboration between producer and composer Neil Giraldo and master blender distiller Ari Sussman. The Three Chord team of expert blenders, coopers, and sensory professionals have developed a multi-step process they call Perfectly Tuned Taste. This process begins by carefully selecting the finest bourbon and rye whiskeys from Kentucky, Tennessee, and Indiana, and then blending them together. Find out more about the whiskeys and distribution in your area at www.threechordbourbon.com.
Located just east of Lake Tahoe and the Sierra Nevada mountains, Frey Ranch Distillery was founded by fifth-generation Nevada farmers. Our grain-to-glass bourbon is made using a 4-grain mash bill, including a non-GMO corn, rye, wheat, and barley, all of which is 100% sustainably grown on the 1,500-acre Frey Ranch. And our commitment to excellence shows with a recent gold medal win at the 2020 Whiskeys of the World and USA Spirits competitions. Find out more at www.freyranch.com.
All right, everybody, welcome back for the third and final session, round period, whatever you want to call it, to the Bourbon Life Podcast. I'm your host, Mark. With me, as always, live in the Bourbon Life Studios is my good friend, my co-host, Matt. Matt, how you doing out there in your own private studio in my basement?
Oh, Mark, I'm doing great, man. You've got my private fireplace lit for me.
Private fireplace, yeah.
That's right. So I'm kind of toasting my buns here by the fire, having a good time on this chilly November evening. So thank you. I appreciate that.
So Matt, people have to understand, we keep our thermostat at like around 64 degrees here in the house. So it's always cold in my house. So when Matt comes over, Mr. Triathlete that's got like a 2% body fat, he sits in my house and just freezes. Like he wears his footies and wears his toboggan in my.
Those are for the non-Eastern Kentucky folk. Those are also called slippers and beanies.
There you go, Matt. Well, I got you in front of the fireplace, man. So hopefully you're staying nice and toasty tonight. Plus, we're drinking some great whiskey, some great bourbon and rye here. So
that's right, we are, and we've got a ripper of a show going with a great guest, James Wood, the brand and sales manager from Starlight Distillery. He's back for round or session or the finale number 3 here. So, James, what do we have poured up?
Yeah, so you all have a sherry finished bourbon, Carl T small batch. The label's a little misleading, if you will, but cask strength, though, I think is what is important to point out here at 107 proof. And for us, what that means is we are. Well, it means the same thing with everybody else, but a little different. We are pulling straight from the barrel into the bottle. There's no filtering done on it. We're not proofing down at all from the cask. So it's literally, 107 on the label means that it was 107 at being taken out of the barrel. That I think that's what's important to point out about this sherry finished bourbon here. And then for those that may ask that are listening, I believe this was Oloroso sherry finish bourbon as well.
Okay. So do you all go into the barrel at a lower proof?
At like 110, 108?
So this is kind of another layer of difficulty, if you will. It really depends on who is doing the entry barrel.
I love it.
For example, Ted Huber tends to be more traditional, I'd say, and goes in that like 120 to 125 range. Jesse, who I mentioned earlier, he's kind of standard. The best way to describe Jesse, I think, is one, he has a background in brewing and distilling, and he's been with us since the distillery opened, and worked with both Jason and some of the other distillers that we worked with to get our distillery operating. And he oversees all production in the distillery with Ted. It's just that he works Monday through Friday, and Jesse is not a Huber. But his kind of standard entry, I'd say, is between like 115 and 118. And then you look at, say, Christian. He really enjoys kind of that like 110 to maybe 114 entry proof. And then Blake tends to be kind of lower on the entry proofs with like those 105s to like 109s, or, kind of in between there. So it's another level of, I don't want to say difficulty, because that's not really what it is, but of just that like hands-on, who's doing it the day of, essentially.
Right.
And that's just it's another thing that makes us unique with our entry proof. So there is no standard. It just depends on who's putting the juice into the barrel that day.
I like that. It's another layer of personality.
There's a good way to put it. Personality. Yeah.
Yeah. Very, very nice. So, So Matt, what are you picking up on this one?
Well, on the nose, I get a lot of the great notes that we had from the George T. Not the George T, the Carl T. Bourbon beforehand.
Listen, that sounds like a oopsie like compliment, because Carl T being compared to George T, I'm like, okay, that sounds like
we'll take it. There you go.
Way off proof though.
Yeah. Well, I like this because I like some of the youthful characteristics that come out in it. There's a lot of we had last year's George T Stag, and I thought it was a little old on the nose. I thought it was a little. Anyway, I don't need to get into that because we're talking about Carl T here. But I like a lot of the younger characteristics that come about with this bourbon. Some more of where it's not so oak dominant. It's not leather. Mm-hmm. It's not tobacco. it's got, I like on this, I get some nice tangerine on the nose. I think there's definitely some red fruit, like some juicy red fruit, almost like a raspberry or a strawberry with it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm definitely picking up that red fruit, Matt, like you said, definitely coming through for sure.
And there's like a little bit of like a cocoa, I think, with the nose as well. Maybe I'm just imagining that, but I really enjoy it. It's another really, really delightful nose, and I'm really appreciating the age and the characteristics that are coming across from this 4 to 6 range that you're bringing with it.
Yeah. So now this one is aged. Does that say 4.5 years? I guess because this is actually a single barrel, right? So this is not a blend. But
yeah. So this is where it kind of like some of the language gets a little tricky.
Okay.
Especially with the interacting with the TTB. So what we do at the distillery when we do these finishing projects, and our finishings include sherry finishes, both Pedro Jimenez and Oloroso sherries. We do ruby and tawny port finishes. We have Sauterne finishes. We have maple syrup finishes. We've done like Scotch barrel finishes. We have all these different things that we do. But what we're doing is we are making blends specifically though for those barrel types. So it's not like we're taking the same, let's say we have 2 Oloroso sherry barrels, and those are typically larger. They're either coming to us in 70s or 90s.
Right.
And so for, we're taking maybe 3 to 4 barrels to completely fill those. And we're doing these small blends. And what tends to happen is that's when we're like, oh, but it is a single barrel that we're bottling.
I gotcha.
So it's just kind of a little, I don't want to necessarily say lost in translation issue.
Gotcha.
But it is where we are doing a blend. So in the bottle, it is a 4.5-year-old minimum with some 5 and some potentially 6-year-old bourbon in there. But what we bottle is just that one barrel.
I got you. So it is the 2 different mash bills then, like the Carl T. That we talked about earlier, those 2 different mash bills blended together, but then you're putting it and you said 70s and 90s, just so people understand, you're talking about the gallon size of the barrel, because bourbon, rye, a lot of the standard barrel, people would say would be 53 gallons, but when you're dealing with wine and things, you're looking at much larger barrels, the 70s and 90 gallons. So
correct. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, that makes sense. Now we were talking in the second round, and then Matt was talking off camera before we came back on. But we were talking about your blending. You were talking about how you guys blend year after year, that there may be some variances. So we've had some people on the show that say, well, year after year, we kind of just let the barrels guide us, and we don't really have a profile that we're shooting for. We just come up with what we think the barrels tell us to do. And then other people are saying, no, year after year, we're going to blend to that specific profile because we want it to be exactly the same. Wherever you get a bottle, whatever year you get a bottle, we want it to be the same. You guys are kind of that mindset, I guess, where you want it to be close. You have the same objective in terms of your profile, but you realize that from year to year, there may be some slight variances.
Yes. So, and I think that mostly stems from the fact that, on our farm, we grow corn and rye. And to my knowledge, there may be a little bit of wheat grown on the property. So not only are we doing everything on site, but we are also growing some of the grains that we use in our production. And what that translates to is that we're trying to express the terroir of our farm in our bourbon and rye whiskey and malt whiskey. And so while we have that flavor profile in the back of our minds, we also understand that distillate that is produced will be different from batch to batch, especially with a sweet mash fermentation process and production process.
Right.
So it's it's kind of a mix of both, like the we let the barrels do the talking kind of blending versus it's this flavor profile from a large batch of barrels process, and trying to integrate both of those philosophies into one.
Yeah, that makes sense. Now, you mentioned your sweet mash process. A lot of people know what that is. Some people don't. So do you care just to kind of explain what that means when you say sweet mash versus sour mash?
Yeah. So sweet mashing is essentially, you have your cook going. After your cook goes into your fermentation tanks, you're cleaning out your cooker to be ready for the next batch. And we also completely seal all of our containers, if you will. So our cooker, our tanks, and our still. So they're completely sealed, which means, if you think of some of the other distilleries that do maybe sour mashing, where you could stick your finger in the wort and taste the mash, you can't do that with us. we want zero bacterial interaction,
Right.
because we're looking to control our yeast interaction with our grains and our sugars. So that's the big difference, is that we are not having any leftovers, any residuals, any backset to be used in future mashes, essentially. So once we're done, we clean it all out and we get to going again.
Yeah, so that's more. I mean, it's a time-consuming process, really. Because you're not using any of the backset from the prior batch that you've done. So you're starting from fresh. You gotta clean everything out, and that's our understanding from talking with Wilderness Trail before, because they're sweet mash. That the bacterial growth is really one of the biggest problems that you can have with the sweet mash. Is that you've really got to regulate it and control it so you don't end up with a bad batch from bacteria. Yeah. So that's real good. But you guys also, you use a pot still, correct? You're not a column distilling. You guys use a pot still, right?
Correct. So little bit about, so we have 3 stills.
Okay.
Our very first still, which came to us from Germany back in 2001 when the distillery opened, it's a small 80-gallon, what I would call hybrid still, where there's a small column on top, like a 5-lens column that sits on top of a copper pot. And that was our very first still. Came over from Germany. Fun story, Ted and Jason, who I mentioned earlier, actually put that together. Because it came to us from Germany completely taken apart, of course, disassembled. And Ted and Jason put that together themselves with directions, if you will, because the engineer that created
written in German.
Yeah. Oh, who knows?
Dankeschön. What?
Yeah. What did well, luckily everybody up there is German heritage, so surely they knew. Somebody could read it. Somebody could decipher it. But the engineer was unable to come over to the distillery because from Germany, because he was in Russia helping put vodka stills together.
Wow.
Yeah. So Ted and Jason looked at the directions, and this is 2001. So it's not like they could just go on YouTube or the internet and look these things up.
Wow.
Jason and Ted's excellent adventure there.
Good reference.
Nice.
So that was our very first still. And our very first still was literally doing everything, including into, I would say 2015, 2016. So our very first bourbons and ryes that were coming off of that still, we were only doing like a barrel or 2 a week of those types of whiskeys. So a lot of folks, we mentioned bourbon picks off camera or off mic, but they're like, can we pick from your oldest stuff? And we're like, no, we may not even have like 90 barrels of that stuff left. Like, we're trying to see how it ages, we have our own special releases we're trying to do. So unfortunately the 7 and 8 year old stuff is mostly off limits, because we just, we didn't produce a lot of it. We're, a barrel or 2 a week. That's just not a lot. Go into 2016, 2017 timeframe. we work with Vendome, they get us a 500-gallon copper pot still. And that's where we do all of our heavy lifting nowadays, with our mash bills and our cooks. And what we do, we have the pot still there, with a really kind of unique, onion and neck that actually connects to a rectifying column, into our collection basket. And what that allows us to do is to pull certain congeners, and oils from the distillate that we want to focus on, essentially, for those flavor profiles, when we're doing the distillate. And it's always really fun for me to see when there are maybe tours happening, or we have clients in the building and we are distilling, for them to taste our hearts of our whiskeys, even on the first run, and they're coming off the still at like 155 or 180, 170 proof.
Mm-hmm.
And people are like, you all need to be bottling your White Dog. Like, this is some of the best,
nice,
just some of the best White Dog that we've ever had. So that's really exciting for me to hear it, because it means we're making a great distillate that are then going into great barrels that are then being used to produce some quality spirits. And then, just to mention, for our light whiskey and our vodka, we do have a column still, that we use for production.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, great explanation. Definitely appreciate that. You're talking about barrels. Let's talk about barrel picks.
Yeah.
You guys seem to do quite a few of those.
We do.
So can you talk about your program that you guys have in place and how that works?
Yeah, for sure. So, I mentioned earlier, when I came on, COVID happened, and I was trying to figure out, like, what can I do here? And I actually kind of just took over the barrel program. The Hubers had done barrel picks before I started. And actually, while I was at Total, I did multiple barrel picks with Starlight Distillery to bring into Total Wine. And so, transitioning into working for the Hubers and selling barrels, it was fun to learn even more about the process and things like that. But just to give you an idea of where we started and where we came and where we are now, in 2019, we topped out at like 50 barrels sold, which does also include things that we selected to sell in the distillery as like a distillery sale picks, if you will.
Right. Yeah.
In 2020, with me taking over the program and working with bourbon groups, liquor stores, I think there were a couple restaurants in there. I got us up to over 200 selections. Wow. And then this year, since I've been able to do some of the work that I got hired for, we actually brought someone else on to do the barrel program. And that's actually Andrew, who was going to join us tonight. So he runs our barrel program currently. And this year, I mean, we're over 600, 700
Holy
selections.
Wow.
So yeah. And that feeds into, again, what we talked about off mic with, the Instagram kind of blowing up. Like, a lot of the stuff you see are these barrel selections, whether they be single barrel bourbons, finishing projects, double oak projects. All of that is from the barrel program. And while that is a thing that needs to happen, right? We also need to be able to grow our core products with that as well, which I think we're doing successfully. But if anybody is interested in the barrel program, you can visit us on our website, starlightdistillery.com. And there is a tab on there that says private selection program. You just click on that. There's a Google form to fill out, and it goes to Andrew for him then to reach back out to you at the review.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good to know, Matt. Good to know. Isn't it?
Absolutely, it is. And I think that's really cool that it sounds like you're more or less giving people carte blanche of what you have for finished products, your regular standard rye and bourbon. Just like you were saying, if you want double barrel, toasted barrel, finished product, that's super cool that it seems like you're not really holding anything back. You want to put your best foot forward and show people what you've got in a single barrel.
Yeah. I think what's a lot of fun for us is showing the uniqueness of the entire property. So for example, when I was leading the program in 2020, last year, my tour for groups consisted of going through production, essentially, going through the winery, going through distillery. Then we go out to the Rickhouse and we start sampling. Andrew elevated that from me and started doing farm tours where he takes you out to like the peaches that are in season and shows like, hey, here's our peaches. We do a peach brandy. And then what we do is we take those used peach brandy barrels and we do a peach brandy finished bourbon in them. Mm-hmm. Or taking you out to our apples, and saying, we take these apples, we sell them on our farm market, we make a non-alcoholic apple cider from them, we do our apple brandies with them. And then when we're, after bottling some apple brandy, we'll take those barrels and we'll do like a Applejack finish, rye whiskey with the barrels. So it's making those connections for folks as well as letting them see the entire property. Mm-hmm. And the thing to keep in mind with us, on top of like, you're getting a lot of visual with the farm and everything, is that you're going to taste through a lot of whiskey, to be frank. I know it's a shame. But a lot of distilleries have mainlined their barrel selection process, if you will, to where you're maybe sampling like 5 barrels total. Right. And it's very much like you're here, taste, pick, get out. For us, we're going to get you what you're excited about. So our process is, we're going to start you off on a couple single barrel bourbons. We're going to see how you think about a Canton Char 3 versus a Kelvin Char 1 versus a Zach Char 2. And we're going to, because all of those all those cooperages have different flavor profiles for their barrels, and they express differently on the palate. And then, if we'll get you started on the bourbons, everything's tasted at cask strength. You're out in the Rickhouse with us. Or if it's too cold, we'll take barrels into the distillery. We stay warm. And then, we'll say, well, hey, we got like these port finishes that we're doing right now. And, this one's a ruby port finish. And what's great is that the ruby wine is from Huber Winery. And so these are our ruby port barrels. Or, we got these tawny style barrels. What do you think of these? If people will see how they feel about those, if they like them, maybe we'll kind of stay on that track. Or if they don't like them, like, well, here's some sherry finish stuff. Or if you're, wanting some more tannin, some more dryness, like, let's go try some double oak stuff. So we've had groups that have decided within like 4 barrels, like, this is the one, we want this. And we've had some groups that try 20 samples, and the great thing about us is that we have our cafe on site, so we're able to feed them and provide lots of water as well. And so it's just overall a really just enjoyable experience. As someone who's done both the selecting at Huber's and the selling at Huber's, at Starlight Distillery, it's really fun to be able to just show it all, if you will. And let's say you don't know, let's just say you have 4 bourbons that you just can't decide between. We'll take you up to our conference room, or if it's a nice day, we'll stay out in the Rickhouse and we'll do a blind for you. And, we'll blind you, and that's how you pick your selection. So, it is a curated to your, palate and what you love most about bourbon kind of experience, I would say, or whiskey, since we got rye. But It's a good, to put it frankly, it's just a good ass time.
Yeah, it sounds like it. No doubt about that.
Yeah,
what do you think,
I'm gonna pack my sleeping bag and make a week out of it.
There you go, man. All right, well, let's get back to the sherry barrel finished bourbon because we're at the end of round 3 or close to it. So, Matt, what do you think in terms of the palate and finish on this one?
The palate definitely picks up some red fruit, some juicy fruit on it. And I say juicy fruit, not like the gum, but actual juicy fruit like strawberries, raspberries, and some of the grapes are coming through as well. Maybe a touch of cherry, but not even so much of that. But then it leads to that really great wheat flavor that we were picking up, I think, in the Carl T, that I got that like nice wheat bread and some of the oak coming through as well. And it's just really well rounded. It's got a good flavor, nice ruby, juicy flavor up front. Then that wheat, that honey, the sweetness comes through mid palate, and the rye again, a little bit more spicy on this one. I think the increase in proof, now we're up at 107, comes through a little bit more black pepper, a little bit more spice, a little more baking spice on the end coming down the line as well, which I really appreciate.
Yep. Again, Matt, I mean, the sweetness, I agree with that. I love the just the way it kind of coats the mouth, but then you get that sweetness, but then it transitions to me over that spiciness. But again, at 107, some people might think, oh, that's going to be really hot. It's not at all. I mean, I'm really not surprised, but it's like, man, 107 proofer that is this easy to drink. I mean, wow.
Yeah.
That's pretty impressive.
And I think it just sits just so well in the chest. I don't know about you all, but one of the things that I deal with especially red wine, high acidity wine, I would say, and whiskey in general, is heartburn. Yep. And I have yet to have a Huber whiskey that causes me to have some of that reflux, some of that heartburn, because of just how easy it just goes down and just sits in your chest. So it's great for me personally.
Yeah. And you know what? It's funny that you say that, because Matt, when we were out there, we picked a barrel with a friend out at Wilderness Trail, and they, we talked about them doing the sweet mash as well. But that was the one of the thing, Matt, I don't know if you remember them talking about that, but the fact that through that sweet mash process, it actually cuts down on that heartburn, reflux type of reaction. What, am I making that up, Matt? Or do you?
No, you're not. You are not making that up in the least.
Okay. Yeah. So a lot of that sweet mash process actually lends to that. And it gets rid of a lot of that heartburn kind of feeling there. So yeah, but I'm really impressed with this one. I'm going to actually probably nurse this bottle after the episode ends tonight.
Yeah.
Take it upstairs and
that's a good decision for sure.
Yeah.
The sherry finish is probably one of our most popular finishes that we do.
Yeah, it's really good. So, James, before we close it out, let's talk about you, the future. What does it look like for you? What does it look like for Huber's Starlight Distillery?
Yeah, so I for me personally, I don't want to say that I'm a guinea pig. But because the position was new and because we are expanding, it's just kind of taking everything day to day and month to month and just seeing what kind of happens. The Hubers have certainly have a vision of what they want to do with their product, and with Starlight Distillery and the bourbons and the rye whiskeys. But it's all about making those right decisions, and with me providing those insights from my experience to help them go in the right direction, if you will. So, for example, we're predominantly distributed in Indiana and Kentucky. We opened up Tennessee at the end of last year. Okay. And we're going to start, we're opening up Maryland, which means DC, as well, and Georgia, at the end of this year. So, kind of getting more into that southern starting south into the mid-Atlantic, which will then get us up into the Northeast with, say, New York, and further into the South with Florida. We're looking at, we just opened up some small distribution, I would say, into west of us with Missouri and Kansas. Okay. But I think that's the future of Starlight is determining the proper states to open distribution in, because, we are still a regional player, I would say, right. Growing into a national production, hopefully in the next, I would say 5 to 10 years, probably, if not 15 years, because we need to add more pot stills, more fermenters, more hands into the production process, and things like that. So for me personally, I'm going to continue with the growth, going to continue having fun on the Instagram and the Facebook account, still get to do fun stuff like this, and definitely want to have you guys up to be able to do a tour with you, maybe a barrel pick in the future. I'll get you connected with Andrew, and just, really showing the country what Starlight and Huber Winery has to offer. Because I do believe we're making some of the best stuff that is currently available.
Yeah, I mean, what we've had tonight's super impressive. It's great, and it's funny because the whole time we've been talking, I don't know if you're familiar with Frey Ranch out in Nevada, but yep. their family, 5-generation farmers, started distilling just to kind of have something different in terms of an income revenue yep. stream. But Ashley and Colby were on the podcast earlier, or I guess last year, maybe.
Yeah, last year.
But they are they're grain to glass, they're farm to bottle, yeah. Which really you guys that same mold, and that just impresses me that you guys every aspect, every step of the process you guys are doing there on site, and that's just really impressive to me. And the products that you're putting out, that they taste so good. It's very impressive. Matt, what do you think?
Absolutely. I think you've done a great job. The passion and the craft definitely comes through in what you put in the bottle. I really like a lot of the business model. I like what you all are doing, especially with each batch kind of having its own little way that it's going, own flavor, but still trying to stick within the kind of some boundaries. I really like that. I really like the way you all are doing it, and can't say enough about how impressed I am with the product.
Thank you very much, guys. Yeah, it's I'm glad it spoke for itself.
yeah, definitely. So you told us about distribution. Now, can people buy you guys online? Can they find product? Can they buy?
So per Indiana state law, it is not legal for us to ship directly to consumers from the distillery. And that's just where Indiana state law, that's kind of the next step of lobbying and legislation that we're working on, to be honest, because with the Kentucky law change just recently, right. We would like to see Indiana do the same thing sooner rather than later. But you find a workaround, of course. We do partner with Sealbox where Sealbox not only does their own kind of barrel picks and special releases with us, but they are kind of our core partner they're our main partner for our core products. So if you're looking for a bottle of Carl T or Old Rickhouse or our number one seller, Blackberry Whiskey, go to Sealbox. And as long as you're in a state that they can ship to, I believe they can ship to, I want to say 16 states.
Okay.
I think. It's either 16 or 32, which I know is, I know that's a huge
It could
difference.
Be 48. We don't know. Yeah. No, I'm just kidding.
I just can't read.
That's okay. They can go to Sealbox and look and see, obviously. Yeah. And I would highly suggest that if you have the opportunity to pick these bottles up, that you do that, especially the 35. What's the Carl T? What's that retail?
MSRP on Carl T is also $35. Um,
Yeah,
yeah,
I know, crazy.
all
Yeah.
day, all
day long.
yeah.
I agree.
And then while Sealbox may not have those pints, so the pints that you have,
Uh-huh.
the sherry finish there, we're keeping those at the distillery only. Kind of still we're experimenting how they're selling essentially.
Okay.
Before we get them into distribution. But I believe Sealbox I believe they have a 750 ml, a fifth of one of our sherry finishes, if you're interested in that. Plus some other product as well. Like I believe they have our Applejack on the website. So if you're interested in just really any of our products and getting them shipped to you, if you don't live in Indiana or Kentucky, then I would suggest checking out Sealbox to see what's available.
Okay. Yeah, that's great. Great advice. And again, I would suggest that you do that if you're not in Indiana or Kentucky. So you mentioned the website earlier, starlightdistillery.com. Is that right?
Yes. So it's actually a backslash of HeberWinery.com. But if you just type in Starlight Distillery, it'll take you to the website. You'll find on a Google search. Yeah, no problem.
And then you're also on Instagram. We talked about just Starlight Distillery. Is that the handle?
It is Starlight_Distillery on Instagram. Okay. And then if you're on Facebook, a quick just Starlight Distillery Facebook search will bring you to our page. Gotcha. I would be remiss if I didn't bring up the fan page on Facebook. It's called All Things Starlight Distillery. It was created by some of our best fans, and it is operated by them. So even though it is about Starlight Distillery, it is not operated by Starlight Distillery. It's admin by those fans, essentially. But it is a great community and resource where people show off literally everything relating to Starlight Distillery.
Very, very nice. Well, James, we've had a great time tonight. We really appreciate it. Matt, James, I'll just ask you, is there anything you'd like to add before we close it out?
Covered social media, covered the distribution, covered the barrel program. Yes. So December 5th, as we all know, is Repeal Day, the end of Prohibition. We will be releasing, so it unfortunately does fall on a Sunday this year, but we are open on Sundays from 11 to 6. We're open 7 days a week as well in general. On Sundays, 11 to 6, but we will be releasing our Family Reserve bourbon and Family Reserve rye whiskey, as well as 3 hand-selected single barrel bourbons that were separately selected by Ted Huber and his 2 sons, Christian and Blake Huber. It's kind of a family competition, if you will, to see who has the best single barrel pick that sells out the fastest, and maybe some other special finishes that will be released. So I know that's coming up this Sunday, but that would be my other final thing to mention is that special release.
All right, that sounds great. Matt, anything you want to add before we wrap it up?
Hey, James, thanks for everything, man. We appreciate you coming on the show. Appreciate having you on the show.
How much you been drinking, Matt?
I'm just really impressed. I came into this not really knowing what to expect with the product and with the story behind you all, and I'm walking away very impressed and thoroughly a fan. So you've done a really great job, and I appreciate everything that's come out of this, and I think our listeners will as well. So thank you for your time.
No, honestly, guys, this has been so much fun, and I really can't wait to have you all up and show you around, and you'll get even more of that connection of the farm to the winery to the distillery, and just get to have that experience for yourselves. So it's a really great time.
Well, we appreciate it, James. And again, thanks for joining us. I know we had some technical difficulties at the very beginning of the show, but hey, everything's worked out. So that's always good when that happens. We got to drink some great whiskey, the rye, the bourbons. And I'm not usually a big finished bourbon fan, but I'm telling you, I'm going to kill this sherry. I'm just telling you, it's so good.
when it's done right, finishes are really exceptional. Yeah.
This is definitely an exceptional finished bourbon. So I'm very happy with that. Thanks for joining us tonight, James. We appreciate it. We appreciate all of our listeners. Everything that you guys do for us. You can always contact us at thebourbonlife@gmail.com. You can find us, of course, on Instagram, Facebook. Join our private Facebook group. And if you have any questions or comments about the show, please just feel free to reach out to us because we love to hear from you guys. We thank all our sponsors. Of course, we are the Bourbon Life Podcast presented by Bespoken Spirits, but we thank all of our sponsors that we have. We appreciate all they do for us. With that said, I'm going to wrap it up, send us home with our tagline, which is, may your glasses always be full and may you keep on living the Bourbon Life.
Thank you for joining us for this week's episode of the Bourbon Life Podcast. Our mission at the Bourbon Life is simple: to share our passion for all things bourbon with you every week. And we'd really love to hear your thoughts on how we're doing. You can find us on Instagram and Facebook at The Bourbon Life. You can also contact us by email at thebourbonlife@gmail.com. And you can always find us on your favorite podcast platform. If you have a moment, we'd love it if you would rate us and give us a review. So until next week, we hope your glass is always full and that you keep on living the Bourbon Life.
Whether it's rye, sour mash Tennessee whiskey, or bourbon, Davidson Reserve has something delicious to offer any whiskey lover's palate. Pick up a bottle of one of our award-winning Davidson Reserve whiskeys from your local retailer today. Visit www.davidsonreserve.com for more information. And cheers to drinking local.